Hello, you're listening to Environmental Soup through the facilities of Trent Radio, and my name is Rob, and you may be listening to this on YouTube or my Substack Environmental Soup archives. Today, I will be talking about COP30, climate conference, and Canada's role in the climate conference, and how Canada is not meeting climate obligations. So, I have an article that I will share first about a pipeline, potential pipeline, which will come after I'm recording this episode, but before I broadcast through the facilities of Trent Radio. There will be a pipeline potentially announced on Thursday. I am recording this on Wednesday, November 25th, 2025. The article is called Ottawa, Alberta agree to broad outlines of energy deal, including support for pipeline. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Daniel Smith have agreed to a memorandum of understanding. And this article is in the CBC by David Thornton, Kate McKenna, and Olivia Strafanovic. And Alberta will be given exemptions from federal environmental laws and other political support for new oil pipeline, so increasing the capacity of oil. There's also a requirement for Alberta to embrace stricter industrial carbon pricing and to invest in carbon capture. Carbon capture is not very effective at reducing emissions. In fact, it locks projects in, and if it allows for increased amount of fossil fuels and a decrease in amount of renewable energy investments or other low carbon. Let's see. There might be a requirement for Alberta to negotiate with the British Columbia government regarding the pipeline, and it's expected to contain wording on a path forward on the border to Northwest BC oil pipeline and exemptions to ban on oil tankers from the northern tip of Vancouver Island to the Alaska border. And Elizabeth May made a video saying that this is the one of the most dangerous straits in the world and in Canada. So Canada is doubling down on fossil fuels. In a previous episode, I talked about how Marconi is investing in fossil fuels. Most of the major projects that have been announced are regarding increased use of fossil fuels, which lead to increased greenhouse gas emissions. So I will be going to a next video, article. The next article is called Ebbie tells Carney it was unacceptable for BC to be excluded in proposed pipeline talks. And this is in CTV by Stephanie Ha and Annie Boldron Oliver. Premier David Abbey said he wanted any political energy deal between Alberta and the federal government to include a cap or potentially a ban on the use of taxpayer dollars to build a pipeline. Pipelines are expensive. And then said that there could be... the article says that the MOU could include changes to the industrial carbon price and support for a new pipeline from Alberta to the west coast. And it could be done with Bill C5, the One Canadian Economy Act. Let's see. And then I'll go to the next article. Quebec is reviewing its greenhouse gas targets, and they committed to reducing annual emissions by 37.5% below 1990 levels by 2030, but now it is saying that they want to reduce the commitment because they're saying that it's not achievable. I find a lot of times governments have no intention of meeting targets that they have committed to. So they keep pushing the target away the closer the date actually comes. And they don't make necessary investments into greenhouse gas reduction. And the Ontario government is backing away from reporting requirements as well. So that's a troubling development. So there's a lot of fossil fuel projects. And now I'll talk about like COP30, the Conference of Parties climate talks, and this is the 30th one. It failed to land a deal on fossil fuel transitions. This article is called COP30 failed to land a deal on the fossil fuel transition. Countries are moving forward anyway, and this is an article in the CBC by Anyat Sai. And then it says Pakistanis were enthusiastic about energy source in 2024 being solar, and then they added 22 gigawatts worth of solar power, more than Canada has ever installed. And then the US, the world's largest oil producer, is doubling down on fossil fuels and trying to get more of the world to buy its carbon emitting energy. And negotiating a roadmap for transitioning away from fossil fuels was unexpectedly added to the agenda after missing from the conversation in the run-up to the summit. The countries failed to reach a deal, but analysts say the fact it has become such a big negotiation point shows that there is a global momentum to move away from fossil fuels. There's 25% of China's economic growth comes from green tech. At the same time, China also accounts for a third of global greenhouse gas emissions due to coal-fired power plants. And then there's talk about falling prices of renewable energy. But renewable energy has fallen and emissions continue to rise. That's another point. In the budget, it talks about reducing emissions per unit of energy, but not a cap of emissions, which are different things. If you're not reducing the amount of emissions, or if you're producing more energy that has less emissions per unit, then you're still increasing the amount of greenhouse gases overall. So that was from the budget. So they're all countries taking action, but not as a collective. They didn't reach consensus on reducing, making a transition away from fossil fuels. There was an article in the National Observer called Tough Climate Summit for Canada, and there was an award called, and this article is from Chris Hatch. The award was called Doing the Most to Achieve the Least, the Fossil of the Day Award. And Canada was given this award in Brazil for the first time since the Hubble years. And I believe that it is deserved because Canada is backing away from climate commitments that it had previously agreed to, including the carbon pricing, and it's backing away from electric vehicle mandates, continuing to subsidize fossil fuels. There's a quote, Canada is completely missing in action, and it's rolling back its progress at home. And then I highlighted Canada is pulling back climate policies while pushing forward fossil fuel subsidies and projects, but the committee seemed particularly stung by Mark Carney's role in flushing climate policies down the drain after so many years, lauding him for raising the alarm about climate risks. And then there was another highlight. There was a sense of betrayal. And then that led to some unusually sharp jabs by the World Committee. Quote, Canada has been wearing hypocrisy as confidently and comfortably as it wears its national denim on denim look, masking fossil fuel expansion behind the language of climate leadership. And that's included in the climate plan. They've planned to sell more fossil fuels in the climate plan itself. So they're increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And then there's another quote. It's sad to see Canada embarrassed on the international stage like this, but even more heartbreaking has been seeing the hard-won and substantial climate progress that we achieved over the past 10 years be torn away piece by piece, end quote. And there's a climate action tracker, and it measures the effect of government pledges and actions against the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And then I have the climate action tracker here. Canada's rating is highly insufficient. And then it would lead, the policies and action would lead to 4 degrees Celsius world. The nationally determined climate target is ranked almost sufficient, which would be a 2 degrees Celsius world. And the 2 degrees Celsius world is still very bad. A 4 degrees Celsius world is awful. And I should say that if we had every degree of increased climate change, global warming will lead to locked in emissions for centuries because of feedback loops. And that is a huge concern. And it's important to reduce as much emissions as we can. But we're not anywhere near that. Then they have a 1.5 degree. They modeled what a 1.5 degree domestic pathway would look like. There's a graph, and they have the fair share. And currently Canada has about between 600 and 700 megatons of carbon equivalents per year. A fair pathway would be less than 400 megatons. So like almost half by 2030. And let's see, the policies and actions will probably result in almost no change in carbon emissions. What's the blue dot? Oh, policies. Oh, minimal change. It'll be probably 650, and then it's ranked highly insufficient. Let's see, but planned policies will get Canada closer to 550. And then the article said that Canada appears to be stalling. It had its worst wildfire season on record. And even Canada's 2030 is not ambitious enough to be 1.5 degrees Celsius compatible. And then let's see, I have there's an article in the Knoll newspaper about carbon storage. I'll look at an article in Al Jazeera called World Leaders Rights Groups React to COP30 Climate Deal. So the UN Secretary said that COP30 has delivered progress, and this is regarding climate adaptation financing and recognition that the world is going to surpass the 1.5 degrees Celsius target under the Paris Agreement. Let's see. And then the European Union Climate Commissioner said, we're not going to hide the fact that we would have preferred to have more ambition on everything. The Colombian president said, I do not accept that the COP30 declaration does not clearly state, as science does, that the cause of the climate crisis is fossil fuels used by capital. If that is not stated, everything else is hypocrisy. Let's see. Amnesty International said quote, yet the lack of participatory, inclusive, and transparent negotiations left both civil society and indigenous peoples who answered the global working together call in large numbers out of the real decision making. So they're saying that indigenous people will not included in the decision making. Oxfam said COP30, quote, offered a spark of hope, but far more heartbreak as ambition of global leaders continues to fall short of what is needed for a livable planet. Oh, and this article is from Al Jazeera staff. And then and then there's in the conversation, there's an article, COP35 Reasons the UN Climate Conference Failed to Deliver on its People's Summit Promise by Andre Bourgeois. It said, I'll just read some of the headlines. Indigenous groups were present but not involved. And then it said that the U.S. was absence created a vacuum. And then implementation through side deals, not the main stage, was another heading. And then the global Matero text, a missed opportunity. And so that's a transition and a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels. There was opposition from Saudi Arabia, India, and other major fossil fuel producers, which watered it down. And then there was a widening gulf. There's a division between oil-producing countries and non-oil producing countries. So, my thoughts on the COP30 is that there should be more agreement to reduce fossil fuels, to increase climate commitments, and there should have been greater input from indigenous nations. And my next episode, I hope to look at gifts as the holidays are approaching. Maybe sustainable gifts, or I have a previous episode on this that I might have, and I will look through the environmental registry, and if I have time, I will post new items on, make new videos about some of the items on the environmental registry, as well as fall environmental news, or conversations. Thank you for listening, and I know that some of you are going into exams, so I wish you success on your exams, and I will be back with a new episode next week. Thank you for listening.